The foundations of conservatism rest on a few core philosophical commitments: a belief in tradition, order, human imperfection, organic society, and gradual change. These appear consistently across major sources and thinkers. The core beliefs of conservatism and how modern day American politicians are contradicting these core beliefs. Let's dive into it. Core foundations of conservatism. 1. Tradition and continuity. Conservatism holds that long-standing institutions, customs, and practices contain accumulated wisdom. They have survived because they work. Society should preserve what has been inherited rather than redesign it from abstract theory. Change is acceptable, but it must be slow, cautious, and rooted in existing institutions. 2. Organic society. Conservatives view society not as a collection of isolated individuals, but as an interdependent organism. Institutions evolve naturally over generations. Social order emerges from tradition, not from centralized planning. 3. Human imperfection. A foundational assumption: humans are flawed, limited, and prone to error. Grand utopian schemes are dangerous because they overestimate human reason. Government should be modest, restrained, and skeptical of sweeping reforms. 4. Rule of law over rule of government. Conservatism emphasizes stable legal frameworks rather than activist government. Law provides continuity and predictability. Government should serve existing ways of life, not transform them. 5. Order and social stability. Social order is a moral good. Institutions like family, religion, and community anchor society. Disorder, rapid change, or revolutionary movements are viewed as destabilizing. 6. Skepticism toward abstract ideologies. Conservatism is wary of theories that claim to reorganize society from first principles. Example: socialism and radical liberalism. It begins with society as it is, not as an ideal blueprint. 7. Belief in God, moral order, especially in American conservatism. American conservatism often includes a religious foundation. Moral truths are grounded in divine or transcendent order. Religion supports social cohesion and ethical behavior. Key thinkers who shaped these foundations: Edmund Burke, father of modern conservatism, emphasized tradition, organic society, and cautious reform. Michael Oakeshott described conservatism as a disposition favoring the familiar over the unknown. Why conservatism looks different in different countries. Because conservatism defends the existing inherited order, what counts as conservative varies by culture. A British conservative defends monarchy and parliamentary tradition. An American conservative defends constitutionalism, free markets, and religious heritage. So at that rate, it's a matter of what you're conserving, and by that definition, it becomes very subjective and dependent on, what the traditions are. I think another factor, you could look at, like the Civil War, for example. The Union was considered Republican while the South was considered Democrat. Does conservatism and liberalism play into that? I would argue that at that rate, the Democrats were more conservative and the Republicans at that rate were more liberal thinking, in that the Republicans were the ones who ended slavery through the Emancipation Proclamation and whatnot. And, it's a controversial thing, too, because that also aided in destabilizing the South, which was Democrat. The South, which favored slavery. So by considering their secession non-existent and that the United States was still a union, by making the law to free the slaves, then that kills a lot of it allows the slaves, if they get word, to then flee to the north and not be slaves any longer. Technically speaking, even if they're in the South, they're not considered slaves by the American government. Of course, that wasn't the reality of it, because in the South side, they had seceded. It gets wishy-washy, but to what tradition are we actually conserving? Because if you take the time frame all the way back there, then slavery would be technically a conservative tradition, or a tradition that could fit into conservatism. Okay, moving on. Modern American conservative politicians contradicting the foundations of conservatism. Modern American conservative politicians often contradict the foundational principles of conservatism: tradition, limited government, fiscal restraint, constitutionalism, and skepticism of populist upheaval. By embracing policies or behaviors that conflict with those core ideas. 1. Abandoning traditional conservative principles for populist loyalty. Modern conservatism has increasingly been redefined as loyalty to Donald Trump rather than adherence to long-standing conservative principles. Political scientist Chris Cooper notes that conservatism is now often defined as following Donald Trump's whims and wills, rather than traditional commitments like free markets or school choice. This means politicians who uphold classical conservative principles, example, Tom Tillis opposing unfunded Medicaid cuts, are labeled moderate or Republicans in name only rhino, even though their positions align with traditional conservatism. The contradiction. Conservatism historically resists personality cults and sudden ideological shifts. Modern politicians contradict this by subordinating principle to personal loyalty. I would like to also note that I believe that this actually started within the United States with the Reagan administration, with Ronald Reagan previously being an actor, his wife an actor. They got into politics, and that is the start of the cult of personality becoming president of the United States, with no intention of doing anything other than making money for that specific group that he was acting for, essentially. You see America start to decline into this popularity contest, or at least the presidency decline into this popularity contest. When it comes to voting, all that person has to do is convince people that they deserve their vote, whether that's by stating that they're going to enact these policies and never do it because it would require effort, or just playing upon cultural trends, pop culture, all this sort of stuff. And you see this so prevalently now, and especially there's a huge contrast between who are labeled good candidates and who are labeled bad candidates. Often the bad candidates fail to do this, and they fail to reach people because they're not hip enough. They're not playing into the pop culture at all. Usually they're more like policy based, or they're just boring in general, and so we see now that this has become very theatrical. Granted, Same things have happened in the majority of democracies or in situations in which people can vote. Usually people become less and less educated upon the world. They may be educated in what they need in the to survive as a citizen, maybe, or at least be a good citizen, or like what their group wants. I think also now we have social media and we have a lot of people diving into tunnel vision with the echo chambers that they're brought into within social media and how the algorithm actually plays upon their engagement with the app. And so we have people becoming less wide in their fact base, and they become so like tribal in, this is what I believe. I don't know why everyone else doesn't believe this. This is all I see on social media, and I can't believe anyone would think differently. Okay. 2. Expanding executive power instead of limiting government. Traditional conservatism emphasizes limited government, constitutional restraint, and skepticism of executive overreach. Donald Trump's governing style is described as strong executive, high-spending populism, which conflicts with constitutional restraint. I would argue that there is no constitutional restraint within this current administration. Furthermore, conservative Congressman Thomas Massie is cited as an example of actual constitutional conservatism, limited government, federalism, fiscal restraint, highlighting how Trump's approach diverges from foundational principles. The contradiction. Supporting expansive executive power contradicts the conservative foundation of limited, restrained government. This is such a prime example of the contradiction. I live in the state of Texas. Marijuana, or at least hemp products, had become sort of legalized and regulated, and you could legally purchase Delta 8, 9, 10. Now they have essentially made it illegal to possess any amount of anything but like 0.3% THC Delta 9. And I find that to be a fascinating thing because it has become a huge market in Texas, and not only in Texas, in the United States. And so when you look at conservatism, free markets, especially in America, free market has been a huge talking point for the entirety of it, especially with the creation of the Grand Old Party with Reagan. Free market has been their selling point. So, on that note, why would you make it illegal when it's becoming such a huge industry? The majority, I don't know what it is, but a huge number of Americans are using marijuana, whether legal or illegal, for recreation, for pain, for PTSD. There's multiple applications of the drug, and it is a lot safer than anything like alcohol, even, which is illegal. It is incredibly less addictive than something as tobacco, which is also legal. And so why mess with the free markets? The only thing I could say that logically makes sense to me is you could potentially, and this is false, and I'll talk about it, but we have the tradition of incarcerating drug users, with the Reagan administration being like the forefront of that, and the war on drugs. Now, marijuana was deemed illegal before then, largely because the cotton industry was growing, and hemp creates a very strong fiber, which can be used in clothing, it was used for the ropes of sailing ships and sailing vessels. It can be used. It has many applications, is I guess what I'm getting at. And the cotton industry was already growing and big. And well, the hemp industry was huge at that point and dominated. But you have this other industry that people could buy into and make a lot of money off of. And so by law, they made it illegal to grow any hemp products in the United States. And that's really where we see the illegalization of marijuana, which was the lesser used part of the hemp plant, where the hemp fiber was really what people were cultivating marijuana for. It was more utilitarian than like recreation and trying to get high. It's fascinating, truly fascinating. 3. Abandoning fiscal restraint. Conservatism traditionally demands balanced budgets, spending discipline, and skepticism of debt. Trump-era conservatism embraced high spending, contradicting the fiscal restraint central to Reagan-era and constitutional conservatism. The contradiction. Modern conservative politicians frequently support large spending packages, deficits, and debt increases, violating the foundational conservative belief in prudent, limited government. Okay, and I was going to touch upon this earlier, but this is the perfect example too. If you look at the trends of the United States debt over each presidential term, conservatives pretty much always increase the national debt, which I find to be an amazing statistic. While, on the other hand, Democrats that are elected typically end up lowering the national debt. Now, I couldn't tell you exactly what goes on behind closed doors in politics and government. Granted, I am not in that scene entirely. You know, I'm not in those rooms, so I don't know how much corruption and background stuff is going on from either party. You know, but what the statistics show is that Republicans tend to raise the debt. And I would also like to note that that has been very true with the Trump administration. But another factor is to look at how much those individuals are actually profiting from their actions. And that's another fact, is that, I don't know, Donald Trump has made like a couple billion. It's more than a couple, but in the billions within this second term, which is very concerning because it shines light on the level of corruption that is most likely within the government. And to say that Democrats are void of that, that's false. There has been corruption within governments. Get corrupted, you know, and I think that's the foundation of America, is that if we see that as citizens, then we are the ones obligated to actually act upon it and do something, which I will also argue that it has become incredibly hard to do so, because if we were to do anything about it, things would get very difficult for a period of time. And the majority of people don't want to do that. We have a lot of luxuries, we have a lot of conveniences, and things are only going to get worse, yes, but in many people's eyes, that is a more comfortable state than just diving into something that's going to be really hard for a period of time that could potentially and most likely get better. But, you know, it could potentially also get worse. That's another fact. 4. Rejecting free market orthodoxy. For decades, American conservatism was defined by free markets, global trade, and anti-collectivism. The rise of nationalist populist conservatism has led to skepticism of free trade, support for tariffs, and government intervention in markets, which contradicts the fusionist conservative tradition, Buckley, Reagan, and Friedman. There is now a major fracture over organized labor, with some conservatives embracing pro-union stances that conflict with 150 years of conservative opposition to unions. The contradiction. Tariffs, industrial policy, and pro-labor positions break from the foundational conservative commitment to free enterprise and minimal government interference. Back on a similar topic that we were discussing earlier, the marijuana thing, that should be free enterprise. That should be able to potentially, if needed, be regulated, but it is a market that is already established. And why is now the government taking a huge stance upon it? And especially the Texas government, which is conservative and Republican. One of the core foundational beliefs is that government stay out of your business, right? On a personal level and on a business level, on an organizational level, and from my perspective, this is now become government throwing itself in between you and your business. It's saying you can't do this because why? There's not really a good reason. There's plenty of reasons to make it legalized. There would be a ton of money in it. It is a huge market already, and that would provide competition and free enterprise, which is a foundational belief of conservatism. 5. Undermining constitutionalism and rule of law. Conservatism is rooted in ordered liberty, rule of law, and constitutional fidelity. The New American notes that even when Trump supports conservative outcomes, judges deregulation, he often uses methods that conflict with constitutional restraint, which is itself a violation of conservative principles. The contradiction. Methods matter in conservatism. Pursuing conservative goals through unconstitutional or norm-breaking means contradicts the philosophy's foundation. I would like to come at it from this standpoint. Trump was not always a conservative, and Trump was not always a Republican. We can look at the other side too, because I'm not just trying to point fingers and such. Obama was not traditionally a Democrat, but he did run as a Democrat, which gave him higher odds to become president because the party was pretty weak at that time, and they needed a face. So, 6. Destabilizing tradition instead of preserving it. Conservatism values continuity, tradition, and gradual change. The shift toward populist, personality-driven politics represents a rapid ideological upheaval, not cautious evolution. Traditional conservative institutions, think tanks, intellectual circles are now fractured between nationalist and populist and classical conservatives. The contradiction. Radical shifts in ideology and rhetoric violate the conservative preference for stability and inherited norms. Summary. Foundations versus modern contradictions. Conservative foundation, modern contradiction. Limited government, strong executive populism, expanded federal power. Fiscal restraint, high spending, large deficits. Free markets, tariffs, anti-globalization, pro-labor shifts. Tradition and continuity, rapid ideological shifts toward populism. Rule of law and constitutionalism, methods that bypass constitutional restraint, principle-based politics, loyalty to personality over philosophy. I want to state that, this has been quite the ride, to say the least. I think government and ruling must be quite the challenge, but this current administration has taken it into and shed light on the amount of corruption and just how much we've fallen from constitutionalism and fallen from our core beliefs as Americans. And I think as Americans, as citizens, we, like I said earlier, we have the right and the duty to actually do something about it. And we haven't. And, that sheds light on what? We cannot form a united group against tyranny, which, that's the foundation of America. That's what we did. That's how we became a nation. Is it because we are lacking individuals within the citizenry? Is there more at play, like people that could be those forces are then taken out, or given those are the people who get cushy jobs and they don't feel that things are actually going wrong, or anything along those lines? Or has the entire system just been so convenient and have things just not gotten bad enough? That's the argument. I personally, I really don't trust government. My entire life, I'm 26 years old, I was born in 2000. What's the government done? Government hadn't done anything for me precisely. I think this is very convenient, and we have a lot of luxuries in the United States. But, there's a lot of needs that are not being met. The housing crisis is only getting worse. People my age and even older, millennials and whatnot, we can't afford homes. We will not be able to afford homes. We would have to work our entire life to then afford a home. And God forbid you start financing it, because you're going to be in debt the entire time, and you're never going to pay that off. That's another factor. You might as well just rent the entire time, because you're going to pay more financing a home that you're never actually going to own than if you just rented it. You'd pay a fraction if you just rented it in comparison. Homelessness is getting worse, or I know someone that doesn't like that word, so I'll say the unhoused situation is getting worse. Many people are becoming, they have less and less homes, or more people are without a home, rather. The economy is not doing well. Our stance on a global and international level, not doing well. The majority of the world dislikes us. There's one nation that uses us very much so, that is also very disliked, but I'm not even convinced they like us. They just like the money we provide them, and the resources we provide them, and the defense we provide them. If none of that was present, they would have nothing to do with us. That's the way I see it. So we've been getting into wars that we have no longer been able to definitively win or garner the resources, because the majority of wars, starting with the Vietnam War, we were just there for resources and free enterprise, all that. But so, you may lose the war, but if you got the resources and you increased the business that you're capable of producing, then did you technically? There's multiple levels to war: an economic side, a war side, which you're actually fighting. There's a ideological side, and can we convince people to live this way, and then we can profit off of them. Colonial side, all this sort of stuff. So things have not gotten any better, and it seems apparent to me that this current administration is more focused on lining the pockets of itself and certain individuals than it has been about the people, which is as a contradiction in itself in a way, because the only reason this administration is because of the people, and this administration's ability to convince a vast majority of people that they are the better option, regardless of any objectivity showing that they would be the better option and actually do what they say they're going to do. Because historically, the opposite was true, that the current president is a historic and known liar, known failed businessman in a lot of respects, and now he's running on this notion that he is trustworthy. He's even compared himself to Jesus. And he's for the people. The dude has never been in the group of the people. You know, his father owned Manhattan, and this dude happened to inherit a lot of it, and has been in bed with a lot of not good people. So, you tell me. Adios. I'm signing off. It's been a pleasure. May God bless you. May we keep the peace. And I hope you have a wonderful day.